aims to address the critical issues related to security and data protection in IoT. I would like to request the esteemed members of this panel to please take their respective seats on the dais. Mr. Vipin Tyagi, Executive Director, Center for Development of Telematics, Iot. Mr. Narendra Nath, Joint Secretary, National Security Council Secretariat, Government of India. Professor Thierry Monta, National Center for Scientific Research. Mr. S.K. Sharma, Deputy Director General, Telecommunication Engineering Center, TEC, Government of India. Mr. Sachin Gaur, India-EU ICT Standards Collaboration Project. In sync with our green endeavor to protect Mother Earth, may I request Ms. Pamela Kumar, Director General, Telecommunication Standards Development Society India, TSDSI, to formally welcome the esteemed members of this panel with a potted sapling. Mr. Vipin Tyagi, Executive Director, Center for Development of Telematics, CDOT. We welcome you, sir. Mr. Narendra Nath, Joint Secretary, National Security Council Secretariat, Government of India. We welcome you, sir. Professor Thierry Monta, National Center for Scientific Research. We welcome you, sir. Mr. S.K. Sharma, Deputy Director General, Telecommunication Engineering Center, TEC, Government of India. We welcome you, sir. Mr. Sachin Gaur, India-EU ICT Standards Collaboration Project. We extend a very warm welcome to all our guests and dignitaries. This session will be chaired by Mr. Vipin Tyagi, who is currently the Executive Director and Chairman of the Project Board at CDOT. Mr. Tyagi has been an innovation and business leader in the information technology and telecommunications industry for over 35 years. At CDOT, he has spearheaded various R&D initiatives aimed at realizing the objectives of flagship missions of the Government of India that include the BharatNet, the Digital India, the Make in India, and the Smart Cities. An alumnus of IIT Delhi, Mr. Tyagi has headed global businesses in India, Japan, Australia, US, and Europe. He has actively worked towards research and development of complex systems, organizational development, and creation of high-performance teams. CDOT has been conferred with several awards and accolades under his able leadership, including the National IPR Award for being the top R&D institution for patents. Sir, may I request you to deliver the opening address of this session on security and data protection in IoT.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think we would like to be, more interactive, more open, and the openness is start with mind. Consequently, what I would really think is that there are dimensions which are generally not spoken about the security, and they are the most important things which actually matter. The businesses and business direction and branding and the market access strategies and the marketing strategy, they try to be taking a little bit cautious approach in terms of talking about the security. Consequently, in my assessment, there are every stakeholder today is impacted by the security or the lack of it. So the stakeholder in typical scenario will be the users, end users. And the end users are the most vulnerable lot out of all the other stakeholders, because at least they have heard about the security, they have heard about what can happen. And but the end users, especially first time users, for them security is a big burden in the neck. Username, remembering password, not noting down, everybody is coming and professing them, every possible way, as if they have committed a crime by coming to the tech world. Consequently, it is important for us to understand, and I'll give you a very simple example that some of you, especially youngsters, can relate. I bought a watch on Amazon. Now I didn't want to give the name of the provider, but Amazon being the very big one, everybody must be buying things from them. And the name of the product started with Amaze something something. Okay, so you're buying the product in the sale that is happening with the product name, starting with Amaze. Then you will think it is an Amazon product, right? Then what happened is that product comes to me. There is no country of origin written. There is no ownership of the device which is written. You have simply invoice online. You bought it. Now once you start activating that particular watch, and watch has got all your personal parameter, GPS, location, and you don't even know whether it has a voice recording also built in. But I would assume and trust that then the first thing it will do, open up this website with www so and so, or download the app on your mobile. Now suddenly all the characters that I don't recognize have appeared on that particular app, and it is asking what is my height, what is my weight, what is the GPS coordinate, what is the address. And unless you fill that, it won't move next stage forward. So if you have spent so much money, you would want it to work, right? And you will not activate. So I called up the contact center of the website from where I purchased, Amazon in this case, and tried to explain to the guy there is a security hazard in this. Nobody has taken me permission that if I buy this product and I have paid earlier before I got in my hand, that they have to take my permission whether I want to be downloading some app, whether I want to be going and visiting a particular website of a particular country. And they said, what are you talking, sir? If it is not working, I'll fix it. Okay? This is security. So if you are security conscious, you cannot operate as an end user. And there are no support system that exist for the end user security. So youngsters end up not even questioning it, simply do it. We are all used to it. So end user security is very, very important. Trusted devices and the trust that built in, country of origin, who's accountable. Nothing is known in this world of IoT, right? Second, and I gave you the example, you can try doing it yourself. But only thing, you are not as educated or sensitized as I am to worry about where my data is going. And on top of it, another device, I did all of that, right? I wanted it to work, so I said, okay, I'll put something, because it was not asking my email address, it was asking. I said, okay, I can compromise that. Then what happened? That got activated, and now they asked me to link it with the Amazon. Okay? And that linking process, the data was going to one website. From there it was going another Amazon account, where I gave again my personal credentials. And then it asked me, would you like to link? And I linked. So now the data is going from this device to some website in some other country, and coming to this big provider, and then only it will work. This is this setup procedure. I think we are living in a world of IoT. Thank you. Tech providers is another stakeholder. They say that, you go to tech provider, they say, my product is certified. It has got built in. There are, you have to put it in firewalls. You have to take care of the cloud security. You have to make sure that there are no vulnerability in your infrastructure. Okay? Then this will work all right. Okay? But if I install that particular platform, I say you have to open this port, you have to open this IP address, you have to make sure that it connects, then you have to have interop across these two. And then you say that, I'm not accountable if anything happens in the packets get diverted somewhere, because not my problem. Within these standards, we take care, we debate. A great deal of debate happens in terms of security, how it will happen, if data goes from module A to module B, function A to function B, how it will be secure, where it will be stored. All the discussions when it comes to the implementation are actually responsibility of the organization which is implementing it. Right? So you are trusting this standard, and the standards themselves cannot have complete security, because security is as regard to the providing those features is add-on in certain sense. And then you want functions to perform as well as possible, right? So all validation, everything happens like that. But security is only, okay, we have to comply. If you have seen the certification that goes on in terms of all these standards of security, they are bare minimum security standard, level 1, level 2, level 3. And then after that you have to open the source code. Now who's going to open the source code? There are no accountability for security which is built in anywhere. So it's a passing buck that goes on in the tech providers. Sorry, I'm being a little bit, more explicit than I should be. But then government. Now suddenly what happens is, the government is where all the bucks stop. And that's why they become very smart in terms of dealing with public. Okay? Dealing with everybody. They want to give a semblance of control over everything that is happening. They want to make sure, yes, we have very fantastic teams, we have the security policies, we have written everything, in our manuals, we have this organization created, I have that committee created, I have the, best class inputs available from everywhere, consequently, everybody is safe. Okay, but then somebody get hacked, and then what happens? They go back to whom? So then there is the community. They go to some police station nearby, right? And police station says, where is the evidence? Have you kept the receipt for this? Are you the real owner? First you have to verify yourself that I am the guy, and I exist, and I have purchased. Then it will get into the system. After that, where it goes, they say, how do I catch somebody? The guys, you have hidden everything from the government. The main job of all the developers was to keep it away from the government. Lawful interception? No. We don't know what is lawful interception. Okay? Picking up the IP address of somebody, the government should not get it. Everybody else get it, it's fine. Right? Aadhaar number should not be there. Why? Because Aadhaar is with government. But what about Amazon? They are my close relative, right? So I can trust them. But I can't trust the government. So the problem is that people who we should be trusting, we are putting a veil in front of them, and people who we should be questioning, we don't want to question. This is the recurrent state of stakeholders of the security. Now, but we have to have conference, we have to debate the issues. So I open it up with that kind of a mental excitement that I created and opened up all the facet of the discussion. I really welcome my panel members, and some of those are really like best you can get. Mr. Narendra Nath, I know he has been DDG Security for some time. He is the one who is responsible for bringing about the testing of the devices, and he is now working in the National Cyber Security Council. Okay. So we have, the best of the guys. With that introduction, I would give it back to Aman. Aman, who is the next speaker, please take back control. How much the time? So I think, as a standard makers, we have to really make some guidelines for implementation. I mean, if they are not part of the whole, standardization process, I think we need to look at, especially IoT. That's why I say, if you do not have a standard, think of the scenario when you don't have a smart city middleware standard at all. You don't know what data is coming from where, going whom, who is user. I mean, what the heck we are talking about? And we debate for 5 years whether we should have a standard in the middleware layer or not. I think we are completely mistaken. Without having one M2M, you are having a big security risk to the lives of the people, to money of the people, and manipulation. Okay? So, no middleware, no security in IoT. And I can debate it in this panel or anywhere else. Because you don't have a place where you are getting data. Okay? If you don't have a place where you know data is coming, how would you secure it? I think if one case that I have to build out of this standardization, if just one, number one, it will be security. Okay.
Thank you, sir, for your opening remarks that have given the much needed stimulus to the ensuing discussion on the critical need of security and data protection. Our next speaker in this session is Sri Narendranath, who is currently working as Joint Secretary, National Security Council Secretariat, with responsibilities for coordination in matters of cybersecurity activities by different entities of the nation. Prior to this, he was Deputy Director General Security Assurance in the Department of Telecommunications, Government of India, with overall responsibilities for the policy formulation and implementation in matters pertaining to telecom network security of India. His current responsibilities include establishment of a National Telecom Security Incident Management Center, Telecom Testing and Security Certification Center, Mobile Device Registry, and Security Audit of Telecom Networks. He is also a member of the High-Level Forum on 5G, which is driving the 5G roadmap for India. He has over 30 years of experience in the diverse areas of telecom. Sir, may I request you to deliver your talk on the security concerns in IoT solutions as a case study for India.
Thanks. Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you. Mr. Tyagi actually, as he said, he had set the tone. And, then in that case, I would start off with certain observations. In this session, I'm not really, I'm good. What I'm going to do is, because I come from the National Security Council Secretariat, I've got a captive audience here, and I'll tell them about, what are our concerns that we have and what we're looking forward to do. That is one part. That might not specifically have to do with IoT, but, IoT factors in a big way in that. Mr. Tyagi pointed to a lot of deficiencies that are happening, and how to address that is something that we should be looking at. So I'll start off with some of the observations. I've been there in the NSCS for the last around, I think, joined in February, but there are some observations we've had. There have been certain breaches that have occurred, and then we did, we went a team of people to go and have a look at the breaches that have occurred, and what we found is that just a month or less than that prior to that breach that had happened in that organization, they had a security audit that was conducted. And, they had all the reports come in and all the compliances done in. And just after that, we had this security breach. So, not just having processes and procedures per se, or as you said, documents and all of that is not really going to help you in security. I think there's a lot of in-depth technical knowledge that people who are conducting these exercises should have, and it would not be just a paper exercise of some checklist being ticked off and certain documents being available. And lots of places we find that they talk about 27001 audits, And like the earlier QMS audits, that quality management system 9001, 2008, or later on audits which are there, they also started to tend to become just perfunctory exercises to show some compliance. And we have had cases where despite those audits we have had security breaches. Now how do you address that is an issue that is exercising our mind. So one of the things we thought is in the country, for example, considering this scale and scope of the organizations that are using ICT systems and the requirement to have secure systems there, the amount of manpower that is required for doing that is not, though we have the certain empaneled auditors, more than 80 are available. And these certain empaneled auditors also go through a certification process of the individuals who are part of the organization which conducts the audit. But still we have this issue. So we have a R&D budget that we under NSCS commands, and then one of the projects that we have given is to create an audit team to develop the capacity and capability in the country for conducting these audits, and especially for the critical infrastructure. And they have been working for some time, around nearly a year now, in building up those teams. And we have got an audit done of the NPCI, that's the National Payment Corporation of India. It's a very critical infrastructure, considering that most of our payment transactions happen to that. But yes, it's a big exercise, and hopefully we hope that you would come up with a set of trained manpower, and also set of guidelines that go beyond the 27001 requirements and specific to the sectors, come up with what are the requirements for the security architecture that is required and the security features that are required of the network elements, the systems that are there, is something that we are trying to build. Okay, so I just wanted to talk that just because we have some documentation is not really going to help. We've had this another engagement that we also have. We have the smart cities. The director also had come. The joint secretary was supposed to come, I suppose. No, Mr. Kunal Kumar, so he didn't come. But one of the concerns that we have regarding smart cities and the IoT devices and all those deployments is the silos in which the smart cities are working and not having standards across the board, and the interoperability problems that occur, and also the scaling up and future developments that will happen in the smart city and the vendor locking that will happen because of that. So I think one thing good that has come out in the morning sessions is that there's an engagement that the Ministry of Urban Development is having with the TSDSI, the TEC and CDOT for having a standards based approach for subsequent work that goes into that. So on that line itself, one of the things they've done is to engage with us also. So they've sent draft documents. Earlier in 2016, we have come out with guidelines, some guidelines that from our office that got passed and were given to all the smart city entities for incorporation in as smart security guidelines in 2016. But they were at a very top level, and motherhood statements that were there in that document, which did not have any real specifics. And that document, you give it to two different people, they would come out with two different set of action points. And we have 100 different people who would give it to, they'd come out with 100 different set of action points. So that was the level at which the document was there. And it was felt that we have to really drill down and then come up with documents so that the different smart cities, there'll be some consistency of application across all the smart cities. So they have shared with us two documents. One is the policy document, which they've based on Pune city, a framework document, policy and framework document with the Pune city. And the other was, specific requirements document. It's called the cyber security provisions for RFPs, draft RFPs. It's a really comprehensive document that they've shared with us. And I have my colleague here. Hi. So he's my colleague. He's going to shortly join us in our organization. So he's currently examining that document, and we'll hope to come back with our own observations in that document. The document has been prepared by with the help of the Data Security Council of India. So that is one exercise that we can say that our office is taking to see that we have secure these things. So specifically coming down to the smart cities and IoT, one of the things that exercises the mind is there's a lot of talk that we have about the different devices having a small footprint, and I've talked in yesterday's dinner also with some of the people. They have a smart footprint, and so you don't have the security requirements built into it, and devices are cheap, and if you add those features, the footprint becomes large and the device would become costly. And because of that, these don't have security features, and you found that IoT devices have been used in attacks. So, and quite recently I've been to Hyderabad and I've been to Bangalore also. There we have got the Center of Excellence for IoT, NASCOM Center of Excellence for IoT in Bangalore. I also visited Triple IT and I met the director there, and I visited IIT Hyderabad. And one of the things that we were talking about is that you talk of IoT devices. If somebody is purchasing an IoT device, can we have something of certification, of security certification of that? Can we classify all the IoT devices and then based on the classification come up with a set of security requirements that device should have, and then certify against those requirements, so that anybody who purchases the device, he knows that this has got the minimum basic security features that are there. So have we enabled our people to do that? We haven't done that, and that is one thing I think is a work that is required to be done. And these some of the institutions which you've visited, we have asked them to look into it and then come up to us with proposals about developing classification of the devices, and then coming out with specific security requirements for those classification of devices, so that we can come with a certification framework, so that security certified devices are able to be bought. We have got the TC, the mandatory testing framework was that, and maybe that could become part of that mandatory testing framework. And also I can bring it to notice that TC also, of course, Mr. Sharma would be discussing that security document that has been prepared. It's a very comprehensive document. And there they have talked about the applications and use cases and the classification based on that. Though we haven't really talked about the device classification and then certification of device in that. So this is one thing that comes to mind that I think we should be talking about. Then another thing about this is one thing that's it's not part of a government policy or anything that, but my own thought process about liability. See, nowadays now what happens is that anybody can purchase any set of devices, deploy in his network, and then that those devices could be a cause for a attack, and he would be not liable for any of that. And once we provide a facility for people to purchase a certified device, and they have an option of purchasing a device which is much less costly and not having the security features. Now he could go because of economic reasons, and he could go for the other set of other device because he doesn't have any liability now. His devices could be used for an attack. So just out of the mind, top of the mind, is it possible to have a liability framework where we say that you would be liable if your device launches a cyber attack if you do not follow due diligence of having a certified device put into your network? Is something that's a thought that I leave to the audience, and whether we should actually go down that path and have that put in place. Then I'd been to IIT Hyderabad there, and one of the things that when we talk of IoT devices is that these devices are all spread out across, and then we require these updates and upgrades that are required to be done, and we should have a secure mechanism for doing that. So there's one project that the ICANN is funded, and which IIT Hyderabad is shortly going to finish off, in terms of having a repository or that a URL where this device would actually go and then get a secure update and upgrade. And even if that particular vendor of the device goes out of the market, that URL actually would point to the correct IP address where this repository of the updates and upgrades are available. That's a project that ICANN had actually funded, so they are also working on that. And I think shortly they will come up with the IIT Hyderabad, the team there is working on it, and they said they would take another 1.5 months to come up with that framework, and maybe once it's evaluated and all, that could be used as a mechanism for having a secure update and updates of IoT devices. Then when we talk of smart cities and IoT, whatever concerns we have, regarding the security. One is at the device level. We talked about having these requirements and certification and all of that, and also having this mechanism for updates and upgrades. The other is regarding monitoring of network traffic, and then finding out for malicious activity and developing a threat intelligence. That is something that we would normally do in any network. And there's an initiative that's happening in this country in terms of what we call the National Cybersecurity Coordination Center, NCCC, we call that, where collecting the metadata from different devices and from different sectors like the telecom sector, the banking sector, the power sector, from the different, and at the aggregated the net flow data, the BGP data, and all of that, aggregated at the national level, and then find out threat intelligence and try to do a predictive analysis of any threats and take mitigative actions. So the NCCC is a project which it's at the stage of the proof of concept, where a small setup has been set up, and we are taking inputs from around 8 to 10 organizations, 2 from the telecom sector, 2 from the banking sector. Like that, we have taken from around 5 different sectors, and getting that metadata traffic and then doing a threat analysis. And based on that, we are also helping those organizations which are sharing the data with us to take mitigative actions. So that is one, and to scale it up to the national level is a challenge, and CDOT is also actively involved in that project, and we thank CDOT for that. The Department of Telecom, at that time when I was there, said we had started a project for doing it, and we did a proof of concept with one of the operators at Mumbai. Then we have done now put it in 4 different places this year, and collecting the net flow data for doing the threat analysis. And that is another dimension of, because when you talk of security, it's not only one, you do different aspects of security and different dimensions, and then you try to ensure security of the networks. In the report that TEC has done, of which I also played a small part, was to talk of different aspects of IoT security, and then we have this application level security that talked about, and the registration and identification procedures, because as he said, there are so many different applications that were there, so many different devices, communication mechanisms, and then we are required to have that common services layer with security as one of the functions that gets concentrated. So they have a provision there in that. I don't know, I'm preempting Mr. Sharma in this. Am I going to preempt you? You're going to? Okay. So, there are provisions for registration and identification procedures for MTM service providers and MTM application service providers. And there's a provision also for a national trust center, and for the endpoint devices to be registered with the National Trust Center. And I don't know what is the status of that. Maybe Mr. Sharma will share where the recommendations that have come into the report, how far those recommendations have come. And I think gone through the report. And of course, though as part of that, but just now I was refreshing my memory, because nearly a year, January I think it was released. But the report, we had done it last year, and it got released in January this year. It's quite some time, but some action on the ground is required to be done. So I hope Sharma will come out with that. The another issue that I was discussing with some people is regarding the privacy issues that you had raised also. We have a PDP bill that is coming along, and regarding protection of personal data. But when you talk of IoT devices and IoT devices, there's a lot of data that gets generated that need not be personal data per se. Because let's say we have IoT deployment in an agricultural setting, and we have data that generates out of all the agricultural operations in terms of atmospheric conditions or soil conditions and environmental conditions. So that data need not be personal data. So we don't have a framework, and I'll tell you, we had when I was there in DOT, there was a request that came from Ahmedabad city for sharing of CDRs, because they wanted to do traffic planning for the city. Now we don't have a mechanism for sharing of CDRs with them, so we just flatly refused, saying that currently we don't have a framework for sharing of that data. So once we talk of IoT devices, and in the PDP bill, you will see one of the principles is minimization of the data. You just collect the data that is essential for for performing that business functionality. But if you look at data as a national resource, or as a resource that's been utilized for public good or for business purposes, then we won't be talking of minimization of the collection of data. We'd be talking of how do I maximize the different data points that can collect, so that I got a good insight, and then I can actually exploit the data for public good, for doing some planning activity. So this is, but do we have a framework for that? I'm not aware. And this is one, we have been having internal discussions, and I had one of the persons here, he's from ISC Bangalore, he's from that Bosch Center. So as I said, let's work together and then come up with some concepts about, when in the IoT sphere, about how the data, how we could actually have frameworks in place so that we can share the data, how to anonymize the data, what are the standards for anonymization, what are the standards for de-identification. So these are some things, that we could think ahead, and then see if this data could be used as a national resource, treat as a national resource, and use it for public good, and have a framework for doing that. So that is one, item of work that we could work on. I don't think it's a simple one, because there'll be a lot of, but still, it's a human activity that we have to undertake. 5G is one area, where we have a lot of traction in the newspapers regarding the security concerns of that, and there's a lot of political connotations to that side of dialogue that happens, that's happening now. So in that, we find that different countries are, advocating different approaches. Like one country would say that, we would like to have the core network with one operator, and we would like to with one vendor, and the access with another vendor is one part they talk of. So basically it boils down to that national governments are looking at some assurance of security that should come about. And the thoughts that come in is it possible to have the hardware from somebody in the core? Let's say, for example, you have the core from somebody else, the transport from somebody else, and the access from somebody else. So the and especially in the 5G, when we have the network slicing that happens, and we would have orchestration across all the completely across end to end, then would it be possible to have all of these three from different places? One thing that comes. I think the standards body should be looking at that and come up with frameworks and assure people that it's possible to do that. The other is, okay, the core, I look at the core and then say that the hardware, the VM layer, and the application I want from three different vendors. So I don't want to put everything in the basket. So would you be able to possibly do that? Is something that maybe the standards body should be looking at, and then come up with some solutions for that, because that is something that people are talking about, and I think that should exercise the standards bodies. Okay. So because especially regarding the vendor diversity and different sections of this thing. Yeah. Then I'll quickly, I think I'll take a couple of more minutes. So as I said that, we talk of building capacity and capability in the country in different technologies. And one of the ways is to, fund R&D projects. So we've been actually doing a review of that and finding that we have lots of capability and capacity in different institutions, but we give peanuts to each of them to actually, because we have to distribute a bowl of peanuts. So we distribute them, and then what happens, you don't get the scale, that tipping over scale where actual solid work gets done and something comes out of the research. So this is one. So we've been actually visiting different entities and then trying to understand what they're doing, and then working out, and then say that let this institute, let's say this particular IIT is there, or IICs, there are some other institutes there, let this institute concentrate on a particular aspect and then build capacity in that. So we are telling that you are doing all the other things, you have everything in your basket, concentrate in one. We'll fund it so that the infrastructure in terms of the manpower, in terms of the physical infrastructure and technical infrastructure created is sufficient for you to do meaningful work. So that is one area. And then looking at, because we have, when we talk of 5G, IoT and smart cities and all, artificial intelligence is one everybody talks about. We talk of blockchains that we're talking about. And so in these particular areas, so we are looking at, having centers of excellence where, and cryptology is another one part. So where centers of excellence where, we can actually concentrate resources so that we could get resources to scale where actually work can get done. Otherwise, one of the things that we're looking at, cryptanalysis and all, we were looking at a few institutes. So everybody wants to have a HPC, high performance computing. And then having, so somebody would say, I would like a 2 petaflop, another person 1 petaflop. So, but that 2 petaflop is not sufficient for the type of work they would do. But because the budget has to be distributed among so many different institutions, we'll say, no, this is something you can do. So everybody gets a 2 petaflop HPC, which doesn't really serve the purpose. So why not, concentrate that cryptanalysis work into a couple of institutes and then see that they get a sufficient computing power so that the work can be done. And maybe that facility could be used by the experts that are available in other institutes, shareable in type of infrastructure. That's another area we are thinking about. So we are open to people to come and talk to us so that we actually foster R&D work in this country, and meaningful R&D work, so that there's a lot of intellectual capital that's available in the country, and that gets actually channelized for getting meaningful work done. So I thank Iot again for the opportunity that's been provided, and the organizers here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for emphasizing upon various subtle aspects that are indispensable for security and data protection. We are privileged to have in the midst of us Mr. Thierry Monta, who is a professor in computer science at National Institute for Applied Sciences, University of Toulouse, and researcher at Laboratory for Analysis and Architecture of Systems, LAS, National Center for Scientific Research. He works on parallel computing, cloud resources management, autonomic middleware, machine-to-machine, and Internet of Things architecture. He represents CNRS at ETSI, 1M2M Consortium, and Eclipse Foundation. He has created the Open M2M project, OM2M, at LAS, and co-leads the OM2M Eclipse open source project. Since 2019, he holds the Smart Mobility Chair at INSA. He has participated in several workshops and hackathons in India on 1M2M standard. He is author of more than 150 regular and invited papers in conferences and journals. Sir, may I request you to deliver your talk on 1M2M security solutions and services.
This is the last one. First, thank you to Iot for this invitation and the opportunity to discover all the various activities that have been done and continue to work on in Iot. I also would like to thank ETSI and the Indian EU and Indico project to support myself. So in this talk, I will discuss about several things, not only security, because security depends also on data and also on services. So I will start with services to give you some point on this, and after I'll go through data and finalize on security in 1M2M. Just an information, so I come from LAS laboratory. This is a laboratory in ICT domain with 8 departments, and we work on hardware part, telecommunication, but also on software, robotics, on specific domain. On IoT, we have several results. So we have created the Eclipse OM2M project, which is an open source implementation of 1M2M. We also developed IoT ontology to describe and make some link between data. And we have also produced a new implementation of 1M2M that we will show during the ETSI IoT week in October. This is an implementation dedicated to a very constrained gateway with only a very small code, less than 50 kilobyte. We also work on autonomic system and IoT, and we develop some fog computing solution to deploy on real implementation. So I will first give general information about 1M2M, then I go through service, data, and security, And during the talk also, I make some brief information about our activity in research on what we would like to push on a 1M2M system. So 1M2M, you know that. It's an interoperability system. We produce a service layer. It's made for multiple vertical system. It could communicate and integrate several different protocols. And also it produces what we call an interworking with other IoT platform. This is a very important part of 1M2M because it allows you to connect to a legacy system on legacy standard and to make the connection with 1M2M. So in the EPU is made to take a specific technology, make the translation into a 1M2M standard, and do also the other way to push 1M2M and make a traduction to the specific standard or specific technology. We have also some specific tools like Flex Container. I will talk a little after on this type of resources. We allow also to connect to different systems. And also we have some semantics, and also I will speak a little about this. So there are several implementations around the world. On Iot, I've got an implementation of 1M2M standard that can be used. So in 1M2M, you deploy different parts of 1M2M in different equipment. So it could be on devices on the right with some services or just an application level. You have 1M2M on the gateway, where we also produce some services, and also 1M2M on the server part on the cloud, and also in the application part through the API. So you see that 1M2M is present all along the IoT end-to-end from IoT application, from devices to application level. This is important for mechanisms. I don't remember if we have seen this kind of slides before. It's just an overview of 1M2M with different levels. So you have 3 different levels. Network layer, where you can get some service from the network. And when we talk about 3GPP, we will be allowed to take more services and use the capability of the network. Over this network layer, you have the service layer, which exposes the different services that you can use when you develop application. And finally, you have the application layer. And we see again at the different part of the IoT system, we have some 1M2M service system on devices, on gateway, and on server. And you can also make a connection with other platforms. In all of those parts, you can deploy different type of services. And we have seen in previous days some different type of service in terms of management of data, device management, permission, communication protocol, and communication paradigms. So you can have on all the different parts, you can deploy some part of the stack of 1M2M if the middleware allows to do that. So now, the service architecture. So it's based on a REST architecture. The REST architecture comes from the web technology. It's allowed to describe all the part of the system as a resources. So resources, in fact, is a link, a URI, to a resources. And on these resources, you can make different operations. You can create resources. You can get the value of the resources, update, delete these resources. So the API is quite simple. You have not so many actions, and after you have some parameter to explain what you want to do exactly. With these resources, you can put some information inside with different format. This is not mandatory. There is no specific request in 1M2M in terms of format. You can use XML, JSON, or more sophisticated format. All the resources are linked together. So with this system, you create, in fact, a tree of resources. And you have seen in the previous presentation on a session of Smart City, some trees from Dell who shows that in development of UK solution. So what 1M2M do in this REST architecture, it defines some specific resources and show how you can link, or you must link these resources. So there is one main, which is called CAC based. This is the entry point of an equipment, of a service layer on an equipment. Under this CAC base, you can create an application entity, AE, and under this application entity, you will store all the information about the resources in terms of data or in terms of metadata if you want to explain more things about the resources. In this container, you can create a content instance. We store a specific value, and you can make an historical store of different value that the devices can collect during the runtime. So now we know a little more about the service and architecture based on resources. We can go through data. So on data, the generic model, when a sensor gets a value, in fact, it's a set of bytes, and you send and you receive a set of bytes from the network. And with this set of bytes, you will try to understand what it means. So you will get the information that this is a value. For example, here it's the number 340. And this value will want to make a structured data to know that, in fact, this value is a luminosity value. And this value, perhaps, you can also want to have some metadata to know that this value have a specific precision, or this is a value from one sensor made by this company. And the next step is to create a knowledge. So to link data together, and we speak also on this this morning with Christophe, with the NSG LD, to link data together. So we would like to know that the sensor, in fact, is in this room, in this town, in this building, and not only the value from the sensor. To do that, 1M2M proposed several things. First, to create a structured data, we have the information model called SDT. The goal of SDT is to produce an harmonized abstract information model, and it is based on the standard on smart device template. At first, this information model was made for smart home, and now there is some work on 1M2M to extend to different vertical domains and to use the same model in a smart city, in industry, and in other use cases. So what brings SDT? You have a structure. So you see a scheme at the end of the slide with different boxes on different parts of the SDT model. It also gives you a way to use it on a different domain, on how you will need to name use the naming system to reference all the devices. It also gives you some tools to manage and to have some flexibility, extensibility, and modularization, and abstraction also, to make some derivation from one equipment to another, and use XML encoding to explain how the model is built. So just an example, we have devices that are made with modules, and modules have some specific properties in terms of store data point, have some action that you can do on this equipment, and you can explain how are made the different equipment of your system. So in 1M2M, you create a domain, like org.1m2m.home for model for home, smart home. You will develop devices, so for example, devices light, and for these devices light, you can switch on or switch off the devices. So you create a binary switch. We will make action of these devices. So like this, you create all the model. On a document, on a TS, you have a description of different modules. More 100 modules are already explained. So you have different type of modules, like a printer, airflow, or alarm speaker. And you also devices specific on the 1M2M group continue to develop new models, new devices, new modules, and you can contribute on this. To store this information in a resource tree, they use a specific resource called Flex Container. This resource is a way to connect 1M2M system with an external representation. So here you connect with a SDT representation, and like this you can access through the resource tree all the information about your devices, your equipment. So now we have data, we structure the data, and the next step is to create a knowledge. So to do that, 1M2M has worked on semantic. So the semantic will enable application to interact not directly with the physical equipment, but with a logical, virtual, annotated representation of the equipment. With semantic, you will create more easily interworking between different applications, and we'll see a little about this later. And you can also make some semantic requests on discovery, and also support data analytics and reasoning. So to create new knowledge based on what you have collected, on what you have described in your system. To do that, to use semantic, the 1M2M use ontology. So ontology, it's a way to represent things. So an ontology is a formal and explicit specification of a shared conceptualization. So it defines three main things: a concept, so it could be a sensor, a measure, a value, humidity, and also it develops relations. So like this type of relation, the humidity sensor one observes the living room humidity. So you develop like this relation between the different description of your system, and then you can create axioms to say there is some specific rule on your system that help you to discover and infer new knowledge. So for example, every sensor that make a measure of humidity are a sensor of humidity. So in 1M2M, you have the resource tree with the common service layer, CSC based, and under this, with application, you can collect data, but now you can also store metadata on a link to an ontology to describe your sensors. For ontology, you can use proprietary description that you meant by your own, but in ontology, we prefer to use already done ontology because you have already a link between different domains. So you have some repository where you can get an ontology. Depending of the domain you use, you will have a description on an ontology that you can use. The ontology is linked to specific resources using the semantic descriptor, which gave an access to your description that you have made. 1M2M define also what we call a base ontology, which describe a generic infrastructure of IoT system. And this is not really, you don't use this ontology directly. This is more to make a connection between different domains and different ontology. So if you have an ontology that describe smart city street, where you can have a sensor of luminosity, you can have also an ontology that describes a smart home, and you have also an equipment that measures luminosity. Using the base ontology, you will make a link and say, well, this is device from a smart home is a sort of depend of the devices on the base ontology, and we have the same link with another specific domain. And like this, we can make new knowledge. Ontology are also used to describe generic interworking. So to make a connection with another technology, you can also automatic connection. With ontology, you have also different resources to make some requests. So you can, for example, make a discovery to say, well, I need to have a sensor that measures humidity in the city of Delhi. So you make this request, and you will get a list of sensors that can measure this humidity. And after, with this each resources, or one, you can make a request to get the value from this sensor. So you have discovery processes, or you can make also a query and ask directly to get the value and say, well, I want a sensor in this room that measure humidity, for example. So there's different ontology. Well-known ontologies that come from W3C called SSN from sensors. 1M2M and 8C also develop their own ontology for specific domain, and this ontology is called SAREF, and there's also some other ontology. So now, in OneM2M, this work on semantic continue. In release 3, you have already some mechanism, but they still work on for release 4 on analytic, data analytic, on reasoning, and also scalability, which is a big problem with semantic, where we can have some long processing time to get the value. So just a few information about our research activity in this domain. So at last, we try to mix web technology with IoT in this called the domain of semantic web of things. So we have architecture deployed in a smart building with several sensors, and we get value from those sensors. And the goal is to make some reasoning and to push some relevant information for business, and also to make some control of the system to have more stable system, or to manage some specific properties. What is known that IoT system gives so many information that you can't push all the information on the cloud. In the future, most information will be deployed and distributed all over the system of IoT. And Gartner predict that 75% of data will be analyzed and collected outside of the cloud. So directly on some of equipments around the architecture of IoT. So we have worked on this and deploy an algorithm called EDR. This is a generic approach to make a dynamic distribution of rules on reasoning, and also distribution of data around an IoT architecture. This is a strategy agnostic. So we create a new interworking proxy entity to connect OneM2M to this node. On this node, on EDR, have a knowledge base and also some capability to ask to OneM2M to make some communication and to propage some information around the IoT architecture. We explore different strategy with EDR. First one is about to reduce communication, so to make a decision nearest from the collected values. So to do that, we have an architecture deployed using OneM2M with different sensors. For example, in room 111, we have information about presence. We have an information about luminosity and temperature. In a gallery, we can manage temperature of the room 111 and 112. And like this, we have deployed this system. In EDR, the first phase is to make an announcement, to say, well, where are the information, and to go all around the deploy architecture from sensor to cloud, to say, well, this information is collected here. It's just an announcement. We don't store the information, but we know this value is stored here. Then we'll push some rules. So a control system will say, well, I want to have some information of comfort. If there is somebody in this room, I want to be sure that the luminosity is at a good level and the temperature is at a good level. We can have also some rule to validate that we have some solar panel. We measure the sun irradiance, and we want to see that if the production of energy is correct depending on the sun luminosity. So we propagate all the rules over the IoT on OneM2M architecture, and we'll fix the rule at the good level. When we have enough information from the sensor, we'll put the rule at this level. So like this, all the rules to manage the system are deployed all around the IoT architecture. This helps you to have scalability, autonomous system, and also a flexibility, because if the system changes and we have a new sensor, the rule can move to go in another place. Or if you lose a sensor, we can also repair the system dynamically. So now on security, I just go through this slide because Mr. Na have already posed a lot of problems that are listed here, and I know Sachin will also talk about this different problem, challenge, and security. So on OneM2M, there is different documents to explain the security. The first one is TS3 with a security solution and give all the infrastructure on architecture for security. And you have also some other document more specialized on device configuration and also of function for security. The security is defined at different level, to define the different security function depending of layers. So you have a security function for identification, authentication, authorization, security association, for data, sensitive data, and also to manage the security. So in the system, the first phase, there's different phases for manage security. You have one at the beginning, it's the enrollment service. So when you switch on a new devices, you need to attach these devices in the 1M2M architecture. So for this, during these phases, you have two things: the provisioning to allow the connection, and also the configuration of the devices depending on the network that you will be attached. So to do that, in 1M2M, there is a remote security provisioning frameworks, and you can use different type of system. You can use a pre-provisioned symmetric key, but you also can use certificate, or you can use another part, like in FreeGPP, with a generic bootstrapping architecture. So you use an extra entities that help you to make these phases. To do these phases, you use two components. One called M2M enrollment function, MEF. On this MEF, you use functions that are produced by the M2M authentication function, MEF. When it is done, you need to deploy application and interact with your IoT architecture. So you have also a authentication system. You have also three different type of possibility. You can use provisioning symmetric key, but also certificate. And also you can use the authentication function with the MAF. So when you have authentication, you need also to make some secure communication. So you can use different type of protocol, HTTPS, but also more constrained protocol like COPS with DTLS for very low devices where we can use HTTP. You have also an authorization system based on access control policy, ACP, which could be static or dynamic. So you can use an external dynamic authorization server that gives you the authorization to access to resources. On each resources, you will define the access control policy. So for one access control policy, you can manage several resources. And also on one resources, you can have different ACP on the same resources. So this is a generation that you need to do. The ACP is represented with two different fields. The first one is called the privilege. It's what you can do when you want to manage these resources and get information from these resources, for example. But also you have a self-privilege that help you to manage the privilege. So when you want to change the access to another resources, you need to change the ACP on these resources. And you need the self-privilege to do that. So you could do a different operation for an ACP. Can create, retrieve, update, delete, notify, and discovery. Make this kind of access on a resources. To do that, you will say, well, on this specific originator, I will give you this kind of privilege. And you can make a request on the resource tree, and this ACP is stored in a resource tree of 1M2M. So we have used this system with the EDR algorithm. In this implementation, our goal is to manage privacy. So to do that, we want to give to each user the possibility to define his own strategy. So when a user adds an equipment in a system, he can say, well, I want to give an access to this information, to this application, to this kind of system. So each user can define for his own data what he wants to do. To do that, we use a personal online data store. This is a concept developed in W3C, where all the information that concern a user is stored in different pods. And when an application, it could be an application on a smartphone, the application, to get information, will contact the pod of the user. And if the user say, well, I agree that this application access to this data, the application get the information. So you don't put the information in all the all application you have. You concentrate all your application, all your data in one pod or several pods, and the pod gives the data to the application. So we change the way of manage the data. So the pods are developed with a solid server. So now in a 1M2M in our implementation, when a user or application want to get an access to an information, he first need to get authorization. So to do that, we define a trust contract between different operators. An operator could be a user, an operator could be a city. So we define which level we want. So once we get when we want to get the value, we first contact the pod of the user to say, well, I would like to have this value. Is there a trust contract between us? If there is a trust contract, the user, the equipment user, will give the information to the originator of the request. For those different implementation, we use a test bed in different domains and smart city. We use in a project on service for connected vehicles, where we want to deploy a different type of services in terms of fleet management, of alarm management, and emergency services. So we have different vehicles that implement a gateway with 1M2M, and they can exchange information with a central system, and we deploy this different algorithm to manage autonomous services on this different equipment. So just to keep in mind, 1M2M is made by a standardization with many companies. It defines an IoT service platform with interoperability is defined by design. So it defines architecture, common service function, information model. But there's still work to be done, and this is also a message for research and development in company and in academic. We need to work on quality of services. So from now, if you want to make a deployment in a constrained domain, we have some possibility at the network level, but at a service layer, we have no mechanism to guarantee and validate quality of services. We need also to manage the distribution of services, data, and management of network. 1M2M defines the API, the relation between the different equipment, but it don't give any information about how you will manage this, how you will optimize specific properties. So each people that develop 1M2M stack do their own choice, but you can also manage this for a different type of application and make a specific constraint on the system. We also, on 1M2M, have started to work on this to make a more autonomous system. So there's some, in the release 4, should be some work on this. And also to study a fog computing architecture, so to make a distribution of system. So I'm finished here, 30 minutes.
Thank you, sir, for your detailed presentation on 1M2M Security and Services Framework. Our next speaker is Mr. Shailendra Kumar Sharma, who is currently the Deputy Director General, Smart Networks at Telecommunication Engineering Center, Department of Telecommunications, Government of India. An alumnus of BITS Pilani and a Master's in Financial Management and International Business Operations, he also had the experience of summer school at Bhabha Atomic Research Center and Tata Institute of Fundamental Research as a National Science Talent Scholar. He is having a rich and varied experience of more than 32 years in the field of telecom, covering operation, planning, development, and management of telecom services. He has been a speaker at various workshops and conferences organized by telecom bodies like the IEEE, ETSI, TSDSI, and ITU-APT. Sir, may I request you to deliver your talk on IoT security work carried out in TEC.
So at the onset, let me thank Iot, headed by Mr. Vipin Tyagi and his core team members for organizing this workshop, and also the August gathering, which I see a galaxy of eminent persons from HC and IEEE, not to mention DG, TSDSI, and of course the esteemed panelists on the dais. So I welcome you all, and before I begin my presentation, I would like to say that I will be dealing more on a macroscopic scale, allowing you to see the finer details at a later stage. So, yeah. So, the work in IoT security domain started in TEC somewhere in November 2016. And we had our first face-to-face meeting in February 2017, whereby more than 40 persons participated from different walks of life, maybe industries and academia as well. So the topics of deliberations were brief overview of M2M, then security, then threat perceptions, and endpoint device security. This is how it went on. Initially, we had study of the various standards available, maybe GSMA or end-to-end security for ITU, defined by ITU. Then we had one M2M, then other standards also to have the detailed view, and then we went on for the macroscopic level study. So then we divided it into 5 groups, like the endpoint device security headed by Mr. Vikas Phogat, network communication security by Mr. Sumit Moga from the Unlimit, and application level security by Mr. Sharad Arora from Sensorize. I think he's one of the speakers in the next panel. Then we had got trusted environment headed by Vijay Madan. He is from TSDSI. Then we have service level security, one of Mr. Arindam Bhattacharya, he was here. I think he is presently gone somewhere. He is from CDOT. Then we had a host of meetings, series of meetings, around more than 50. And then it culminated into this document, which we will be discussing in detail. And not in detail, but I will give you the main concepts of that document. It's difficult to present the entire document, but the main concepts I will be touching upon. So this document was basically made to act as a guideline that prompts the use of appropriate standards in policy making and deployment rather than any standards. So this document was released on 8th of January this year by our Honorable Minister. So before I delve into the further aspects of this document, I will just briefly tell that what is IoT, whichever is connected via the internet is IoT. Then what is the significance of IoT? No longer does the object just relate to the process, it now connects to surrounding objects and database, permitting big data analytics. So IoT has evolved from the convergence of wireless technologies, microelectromechanical systems, microservices, and the internet. The convergence has toned down the walls between operational technology and information technology, allowing unstructured machine-generated data to be analyzed for insights that will drive improvements. Now, there are various protocols, communication protocols that everybody is aware of. I will be just skipping these slides. There has to be communication between device to cloud, then of course device to device, then device to gateway. Then there are back-end data sharing which has to be done to achieve the internet. The constraint being the smart devices have used internet protocol IPv4 that is running low on available IP addresses. So this is being replaced by IPv6 in the coming future. So these things I'll just skip, that we all know what is security, what is and why there is a need for security. Because billions and billions of devices are now going to be connected through the net, which are going to open, you can say, additional holes in the society for the attackers to perpetuate their malicious intent. So we have to be safeguarding against those holes. Now, while we were discussing, we found that the weakest link in the entire IoT ecosystem is the endpoint devices, from where these attacks can be originated. In the normal, you can say, way of working, we have got the 7 layers of working: the physical, the transport, the application layer, the services layer. All these layers are having their own security protocols. So the minute details of security are being taken care of by the various standards. Here I will be presenting to you the macroscopic picture, whereby you have to have a trust in the entire ecosystem of the IoT. And then as we use this IoT, we have to ensure that the entire ecosystem is trustworthy. Like, for example, when you go out in an aeroplane, you are very, very sure the services that are going to be offered are of a particular quality. You don't go and check for the pilot's license. You don't go and check for the tire pressures. You don't go whether the cabin is worthy of the pressure to withstand at the high altitudes. That everything is taken care of by a system. So also in IoT, there are various stakeholders in IoT. So before that, let me give you some idea about trust and what is the relationship between security, privacy, and trust. All basically are interdependent. So besides the connected devices, security of applications and services are also to be taken seriously. At deeper level, trust is regarded as a consequence of progress towards security or privacy objectives. A measure of confidence that an entity will behave in an expected manner despite the lack of ability to monitor or control the environment in which it operates. So the future of IoT or M2M cannot be realized without addressing security and privacy risks. And privacy and security is a shared responsibility of each and every stakeholder. Like we as citizens of this country, we are also responsible partly in the security of the country. So also for the IoT ecosystem. How that will take place, I will be explaining it in the next few slides. So as I said, these are the various stakeholders: M2M application service provider, manufacturers of M2M devices gateways, M2M service providers, network operators, users, and consumers. So all are forming the part of the IoT ecosystem. Each and everybody has got a role to play in making the entire ecosystem secure. Of course, this has been very aptly being covered by my previous speaker. Regarding the enrollment functions and also, I will skipping all these things. These are some technical literatures which are already available. So we will not be discussing these. Now, why we say working for the smart cities? Smart cities is possible because IoT is possible. IoT is possible now because 5G is there. So 5G is the enabler for IoT, and IoT is the enabler for smart cities. You can see it in that way. So this I will be skipping because, as I told you, there are various protocols in the various 7 layers which already take care of the security functions. Now, the IoT threats are more serious, enhanced from merely manipulating information to controlling actuation, from the digital to physical, with the possibility to cause grave consequences of public health, safety, and security. IoT requires greater security and privacy than the virtual internet or the wireless mobile put together. Because IoT is a combination of both. So this trust aspect is briefly explained, giving you an example of an aeroplane. But these slides offer the various definitions of trust, the attributes of trust, and the understanding of trust. I will be skipping the various definitions offered by ITU regarding the trust, the relationship between two entities where each one is certain that the other will behave exactly as it expects. Say, for example, if there is a application which you download on your mobile and it says that that application will be doing a particular thing, we believe that that application will be doing that particular thing, not more than that or not less than that. Probably it is not stealing your data surreptitiously. So who will ensure that? So in the following slides, I will be clearing. So trust has got various domains. We have got the social domain, whereby these are the attributes. Then we have got the cyber domain, which takes care of the completeness, credibility, and relevance, accuracy of the data. Then we have got the physical domain. Security mainly concerns technological aspects such as the confidentiality, availability, and integrity. That is from the technical point of view or technology point of view. Whereas privacy is more concerned with the user's behavior and from the user's point of view. Trust is an interrelation between privacy and security. In a way, if my data is secure, then of course my privacy is also secured. If a particular person is able to hack into the system and steal my data, that means security is low, the privacy aspect has also gone to the winds. So as I told you, we have divided the security into the various sections, and each LPCC, that is lead person cum coordinator, they put forward their recommendations, which are now being discussed. Now, technical report and recommendations in IoT M2M security was prepared and released by Minister. This was widely circulated to the various other ministries, organizations like Ministry of Urban Development, MOD, BIS, TSDSI, CDOT, NITI Aayog, HC, and of course to some other organizations also, which I have not mentioned. This TR has invoked interest at NITI Aayog regarding report and formation and finalization of framework for NTC, which we are presently at the finalization stage. Now, this report introduced certain new concepts like machine KYC or KYM. That is, KYC is know your customer, KYM is know your machines. Endpoint device classification. Not all devices, they require the same level of security. Probably, if we go by the graded way of the security for various IoT devices, we would be fulfilling the objectives in a much better way. Then classification of security requirements as per use cases and framework for National Trust Center. And this can also be extrapolated to Global Trust Center to make the entire ecosystem on this planet safe with respect to IoT. Of course, this report had defined IoT security as IoT security deals with safeguarding connected devices, physical and virtual, in addition to the networks and IT security for the Internet of Things. This is the definition as we have come up after a lot of deliberations in this report. What is IoT security? Now, this report delved upon various issues like define guidelines from security angle in relation to data ownership and retention period, security of sensitive data, location of application services, location of remote terminals, location of core network elements, then enabling interconnection of legacy and non-IP devices, then KYC norms, machine concept of machine KYC, then of course M2M product certification. There is a MTCT scheme launched this July by Telecom Engineering Center, whereby any telecom product which has to be inducted into the telecom network has to be essentially be certified against the essential requirements as defined by TEC, and those are available on the TEC websites. And this is going to be mandatory with respect to 1st of January. Presently, it is optional. Securing and protecting the things that matter most, our systems, our data, and our privacy is a shared responsibility, as I told earlier. How we will see in the coming slides. So do all endpoint devices need to conform to same level of security? Why? Because if we entail them to the same level, it will add to the cost. Probably it is not economical to classify all devices at one level. So this you can see we have graded the devices at various levels, the security requirement, that is L0, L1, L2, L3, L4 and L5. And these are the various levels of assurance levels that are required. L0 is no security, L1 is device identification, L2 is identification and verification, L3 is identification and verification by second factor, L4 is identification and authentication in PKI, and L5 is device authentication and by user end user biometrics also. So that is the highest level of security, that is the L5 level. Of course, I will skip this. It's technical, it will take some time. Then there are certain recommendations regarding network communication security, how it should be achieved. It is imperative that protocol stack of an M2M device has a robust and well-protected management control frames to prevent access to the information stored in the devices, which can be used by an attacker to compromise not only the devices but the entire M2M ecosystem. Each entity in the M2M service chain should be responsible for the KYC of its customer, bulk KYC for the B2B relationship, and the final customer-facing entity, that is B2C, should be responsible for fulfilling the customer KYC requirements. Just as the owner of the same is responsible for information by the TSP, for informing the TSPs for effecting any change in ownership of the same, similarly, the first and existing owner of the device should be responsible for transfer of ownership in case the device changes hands. So these are the details for application level security, which was headed by Mr. Sharad Arora. I am skipping these slides because of paucity of time, but the concept is well known. So this is the functional requirement or the roles in an IoT ecosystem which the various stakeholders are fulfilling. The user fulfills all of the following criteria. First, uses an M2M solution. The application service provider fulfills all of the following criteria, provides an M2M application service, operates M2M applications, and so on and so forth for the M2M service provider and the network service provider. Now, what is the framework that we have suggested? It is registration of M2M service provider by a competent authority recommended by DOT, then registration of M2M application service provider by registrars within the industry vertical, then connected devices as mandated by TEC MCT scheme, a national register for all M2M machines, embedded tamper resistant entity that can be enable a machine KYC, then specifications, certifications and compliances for IoT M2M devices by use case categories, then identity, version and configuration details registered along with the machine KYC holder. Now, what is this concept of machine KYC or know your machine? The present licensing and regulatory regime is totally focused on provisioning of voice and data services for usage by humans. Accordingly, it covers issues such as customer acquisition, their KYC, customer data retention and sharing, security and LEA requirements, quality of service compliance, tariff controls and roaming. However, M2M service encompasses a plethora of other services that have evolved from the IT domain. KYC of any customer is mandated for any individual utilizing human-to-human communication services. Similarly, it shall be prudent to ensure KYC of the OEMs of the machines or devices and that of the ultimate owners of that machine or devices. The concept of machine KYC is fast becoming relevant. It is not sufficient to know the identity of the owner of the connectivity element, but equally important to know the machine in which the connectivity element is fitted in. And the National Trust Center will identify machines based on temper-resistant connectivity elements. So therefore, simpler solutions shall have to be evolved for implementing KYC norms for the M2M devices. The KYC norms for each of the individual M2M service verticals should be part of the TEC standards finalization agenda. For the automobiles, the MDN can be captured as part of the registration process, similar to the engine and the chassis numbers. The activation or deactivation of the SIM should be permitted only once the copy of RC is submitted to the TSP by the original or subsequent purchaser. So forth and so on. We can frame these guidelines for the various industries. I will be skipping this. Now, these are the use cases. Depending upon the use cases, you can have the security requirements. One is mission critical, high quality of service and sensitive information. Then mission critical, high quality of service and non-sensitive information. That is where the privacy requirements are very low. Non-critical, best effort, sensitive information. Non-critical, best effort, non-sensitive information. So these are basically the various categories, and depending upon these categories, you can fit your use case, and then of course the security requirements at the endpoint device levels. So this is the trust model that we have recommended. In the right hand side, if you see, you have to record the embedded machine identity or machine KYC, identify the machine's capability, configuration and purpose for the use case, record the identity of the application server and the machines to be parented, record the identity of the M2M service provider who is responsible for the machine with the possibility of admitting changes in the M2M service provider, identify the owner of the machine with the possibility of admitting changes of the owner, command the machine to reveal its identity, configuration, ensure location discovery, and of course lastly, lawful interception, block, shutdown in case the device behaves maliciously. So that should be capable of being done through National Trust Center. So these are the salient points which have been recommended for the National Trust Center. And these are the various parameters against devices and application which are to be fulfilled. This will depend upon the use cases. This is in the left hand side, you are seeing the critical high quality of service sensitive use case, then critical high quality service non-sensitive use case. Then you have got the various authentication levels defined over here required. Then what is required in the transport layer, whether encryption is mandatory or not. Then KYC, whether mandatory or not. So these are the various methods listed for reducing risk. Of course, they will be available on my slides. I think with the paucity of time, I will be winding up in another 2 minutes. Then establishment of a secure association by generating, these are the various. So in the end, when I come, a contribution on MKYC has been prepared to be submitted to ITU and is under discussion and finalization in NWG 17. Similarly, a contribution on EP declassification and requirements of security as per use cases are under preparation to be submitted to ITU. Then framework for NTC is being worked out by subgroup LPCCs and is under finalization, of which our LPCCs are members of that, as interests of Niti Aayog for its implementation. Then for purpose of dissemination, we have conducted 2 webinars so that the concept is well undertaken by the society at large, and it is for the benefit of the society. Then of course the entire thing is available, the TR is available on the website. An ardent inquisitive reader can always access the TR on IoT M2M security from TEC website under M2M IoT reports, and feedback from all are welcome for the improvement, because we believe it is for the people, by the people and of the people, as rightly Paul Timmers had evoked yesterday. The sovereignty is of importance. So also while framing the document, we have taken care of that. It is an all-inclusive effort by the academia and the intelligentsia, whoever is willing to participate in improvement. Thanks a lot.